You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get me.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on your favorite podcast app, review the show on all those apps. We have links in the show notes to make all this stuff easy to find. It all helps. We can continue having great conversations like the one we're having today with Will Saletan. Will Saletan wrote for Slate for 25 years, and now he's been with the Bulwark for over 3. He's also the author of Bearing Right, How Conservatives Won the Abortion War. And then in 2023, he wrote The Corruption of Lindsey Graham, a case study in the rise of authoritarianism, which is when it's been too long. Will, that's the last time we spoke to you when that came out. How you doing?
Great, Corey. How have you been?
I've been good. Not much has happened since the last time we talked, so I don't know what we're going to find today. Well, in all seriousness, it has been a minute, but like I said, it was right after Corruption of Lindsey Graham came out. I've been reading so much of your work and always love hearing you on the Bulwark podcast of Mona Charan and JVL a couple of weeks ago, and all the rest of the team. But I was curious to hear from you more personally, like as you reflect back on everything, say, I mean, it's been a year and a half, but just prior to the election, Trump securing the Republican nomination, the debate, Biden's withdrawal, Kamala's emergence, just all of those key points throughout the lead up to the election. How were you processing all of that?
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's just, I mean, I know that I had my wife and I planned a vacation, which we just did in early March, the mid-March, and I believe at the time that we planned the vacation and we were out of the country, I believe I thought, that's a safe time because we'll be a couple of months into Biden's second term at that point. And we'll be through the part where the Trump people contested another election and there was all sorts of fighting and maybe there was some violence in the streets and hopefully we got through that. So let's just say, Corey, things didn't exactly pan out the way I expected them to. And I,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
I think it probably everything. I was probably one of the people who, up until Joe Biden literally went on stage and showed that how far he had deteriorated, I was surprised at that point, and then there was just a cascade of craziness from there, and now the cascade has accelerated.
Yeah. So as late as spring of 2024, my lasting impression was that last State of the Union speech that he gave, and I thought, oh, maybe he could pull this thing out. But then, obviously, the debate kind of revealed what apparently had been going on behind the scenes. Were you right after the debate? Was it clear to you immediately that something had to change, or were you? 'Cause there were smart people who were saying no, he needs to stay in. He has the best chance. Like Mike Madrid in particular was very strongly in favor of that. Where was your head at after the debate?
Oh no, no, I was like, oh, this is really bad. I mean,
Yeah,
there's people on the right often, I definitely have seen them say they think that there is a giant conspiracy on the left that everybody knows. Like there was the whole demented Joe Biden thing, and the liberals are covering it up and whatnot. And in retrospect, it does seem to be true. I mean, we now have reporting. We have some books that have come out. Ron Klain,
yeah,
Biden's then chief of staff, saying that, yeah, you know what? In fact, in the debate prep, it was clear that Biden did not have it together. Um, but generally, most Democrats were like, what the hell is going on here? We were all like very surprised because, that Biden had, and the White House had sort of measured out his appearances. And as far as I can tell, Joe Biden to this day is a lucid thinker.
right.
He can think his way through things, but the ability to stand on your feet and talk,
Yeah,
and answer questions and respond to what your opponent is saying, that kind of thing, that's that's a
See.
different level of interaction.
Yeah.
And you have to be, quick on your feet. And he just wasn't anymore. And to such an extent that he was not competent to run the campaign. And I'll tell you to this day, Corey, I think that Joe Biden could do the job of president right now, because the job does not require you to be snappy. It requires you to be patient, wise, reflective, have good values. And when Joe Biden has time to make decisions, I think they're good decisions. But he was not competent to run that campaign, and he should not have been there. And it was, in my view, a scandal that the people around him covered that up because they gambled this country on it. To his credit, Biden dropped out of the race, but there wasn't time to fix the problem at that point. And maybe it's true that no incumbent could have won under the circumstances of people feeling that the economy wasn't serving them.
So
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, not to look too much through the rearview mirror, but I do wonder if he announced that he was doing the transition thing and a one-term president in 2022 and allowed a real primary to happen, depending on who, Pete Buttigieg or Shapiro or Whitmer or any one of these Westmore, any one of these candidates could have emerged. Do you think that if that process was allowed to take place, that the results would have been different than what we saw?
They would have been different. I don't know if they would have been different enough. And
Mm,
I say this, first of all, let me be clear. I think Kamala Harris, given the situation that she was dumped into, did a terrific job. She did a better job, frankly, Corey, than I expected from her because I remember her from 2019,
right.
2020. She was very tentative. She was always very good on offense and bad on defense. Just she got insecure, tight, didn't know how to deal with questions. She was evasive. There was video of her doing that. In 2024, I think she did a great job, but she had this problem. If it was a change election, as many people believe, people were just unhappy. I mean, I know my friends at the Bulwark, we all thought, like, hey, actually, the economy is pretty good. If you look at the indicators, he's doing a good job. But people didn't feel that. And
Mhm.
if it was a change election, you needed somebody to come in from the outside. You couldn't have the vice president stepping in and saying, okay, I'm going to somehow shake things up. Because as Trump said, you were there for 4 years. Why didn't you do all these things you say you're going to do? And there was the additional problem of she didn't want to separate, she didn't feel comfortable separating herself from Biden, or there was an argument that Biden actually didn't let her, didn't
Yeah.
accept the idea that his vice president would run and renounce any part of his legacy. So you have the situation where she is what? She was on the, was it The
The
View, where she
View, I
said,
think. Yeah.
yeah, she said, is there anything that you disagree with the president? Well, there is not a thing that comes to mind. And that was, in a change election, that was a killer.
You know what's funny is when she said that, I had the same reaction to that as when Mitt Romney said a file folder full of women or something. What was that from the 20
Binders full of women. We
binders
have
full of women?
binders full of
I
women.
thought it
Yeah.
was, I thought it was, he could have worded it differently. In her case, she could have worded it differently. But like, come on, this is going to change the whole direction of the elect. Like, but I guess to your point, it was so central to what folks, the folks who actually did either come out who wouldn't have come out or stayed home who might have otherwise come out and voted for
Mhm.
Kamala, or maybe those few in the middle in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, et cetera, that actually do switch their votes from one election to the next. I guess it mattered. But so you said one of the core factors in this past election was that people, guys like me, I look at GDP, I look at unemployment numbers, I do look at the stock, not just the stock bond markets as well. And I saw that inflation, I saw everything moving in the right direction, but you say people didn't feel it. Gas prices, egg prices. My question is, things are not moving in the right direction. The indicators are not good. And there's a, but are people, but folks that I know who either voted for Trump or are at least sympathetic with Trump, the Trump magic is already happening. The distractions of something else are already happening. Oh, well, it's a transition that we have to go through, or maybe they're focused on other. So, do you think that the people who will change the results of the next election are going to feel what can reasonably be seen, say, the results of the tariffs or unemployment rising or or gas prices and egg prices rising?
They're going to feel it. I'm torn about how to answer your question. So, what answer number one is the 2024 election broke some of my assumptions about how politics works,
Mm,
which are reality will tell, reality will register. People will, I expected people to do the rational thing,
yeah,
which was certainly not to bring back the January 6th guy, not to bring, I mean, and also that Trump ran in 2024 saying all kinds of crazy stuff, like that he would impose tariffs on every country in the world, which he's now done.
yeah,
I mean, and there were many other ways in which Trump sort of violated basic rules of politics, and people reelected him anyway. So I'm like, I don't know what to expect from people anymore. My assumptions, my political prognostications, my predictions based on the rationality of people have not done well. So I got to reconsider the rationality of people. However, that's my answer number one. On the other side, Corey, what people say about the stock market is the reality eventually does tell. And when you go for a long time with it, like how can the price to earnings ratio be at this level? That doesn't make sense. Well, things are different now. There's always a school of people say, it's not true anymore. The rules have changed. Pretty much eventually things come back down to earth. The reality sets in. I have to believe that particularly on economic matters, even an authoritarian American government that puts out its own propaganda, and even with a cult behind it, let's say a third of the country willing to believe anything they say, that things are good even when they're obviously bad. Even with all that, I do think that economic reality will impose itself. People just feel it.
yeah.
Things become more expensive. And I don't think you can really cover that up unless you use, I mean, people like Putin eventually have to use force. And if you don't have that level of authoritarianism, if you just have lies from the government, I don't think that government can survive in an actual democracy.
Yeah. So I want to stay prior to the election for a second. There's plenty to talk about what's happened since the election and since Trump took power again. Were you were you I know from reading your stuff and listening to you during the fall that you were consistently saying it's a coin flip. But were you leaning on one side or the other in terms of did you think that Kamala would pull it out? Because you say that at the end of the day, you believe in the reasonableness of the average citizen, right?
Yeah, I would say I have actually have a memory of timing on this. Probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the election, I switched. I thought Kamala would pull it out. And
Hmm.
there were signs. Remember, she comes into Biden drops out, she comes in, there's the debate, she surges, she's ahead of Trump. Okay, looks to me like rationality is setting in. She's pulling away. At least people have agreed that they shouldn't put Donald Trump back in the White House, even if they're not thrilled with her. And she was doing everything right. And then about a week and a half, I have to go back and look. I did the Bulwark pod with Tim Miller about a week and a half before the election, is my recollection. And I was looking at polls,
Right.
and I said to Tim, I feel like I'm looking at a bad oncology report.
Oh,
I feel like the doctor's doing everything right, the patient's doing everything right, but I'm looking at these numbers and they're not going in the right direction. And anybody who's been through cancer or anyone they love been through cancer, you know what this is like when the underlying thing that you're trying to change is not changing. In fact, it's
mm,
going in the wrong direction. And that's when you start planning for the end. So I said to Tim, that's the way I feel here. Like everything is going the way it should for her to win, except these numbers, and these numbers are what matters. So clearly I hadn't been in touch with some underlying reality that she had failed to tap into or that Trump was tapping into.
so I think you and I were probably similar leading up to a certain point. But I in studying your work, I'm trying to be cognizant of my own biases as I was in the fall. But I was looking at the polls, and because of those biases, maybe I was looking at the polls and projections that I respect, and thinking that the good ones have accounted for certain factors they hadn't accounted for in the past. And even though the polls were closer than prior elections, in particular 2016, that it's okay that Kamala is only up, a point and a half or two versus the 4 to 6 that Hillary was at the same point in the election. But I was still thinking it's a coin flip, it's razor's edge, but America's pulled it out in the past. If you study the 1860 election, for example, it's nothing short of a miracle that Abraham Lincoln was elected president. So we've pulled these things out in the past. What really got me, talk about ponies and rainbows, was the Ann Seltzer poll. That
Oh, wow.
Saturday night when that came out, I remember I was sitting at this charity poker tournament, and I saw the news flash, and I'm like, oh, I could actually be optimistic now.
Right.
So, and it's funny because I'm probably like a lot of your colleagues. I'm like a Ryan Romney type of Burkean, or I don't know, Jack Kempian type conservative at the end of it. And here I am really pulling for Kamala of all Democratic candidates.
Well, all that stuff's inverted now. I mean the people who voted for my son was razzing me last night about, like, how did I become a Dick Cheney guy? Because we get the Cheneys are on my side, and like to
Yeah.
him that's the devil, and I'm like, dude, you have no idea. There's a new devil in town, and all those things have been turned upside down. Um, Wait, I wanted to come back to your question. Remind me before we got to that. You were talking about. Mm,
The what leading up to the 5th, like you weren't the ponies and rainbows guy leading up to November 5th.
right, right. I actually, I've got the ponies right here. I've got my pony, which I bring out every once in a while when I have something to. But honestly, Corey, I have not. I was supposed to be the pony guy when Charlie Sykes was here at the Bulwark. I was always the pony guy, and I have kind of fallen down on the job
Oh,
because I've just been pessimistic. And I remember going on election night. We were doing a pod with my colleagues, and people were like really optimistic about what was going to happen. And man, I was just not. It was partly because of what I just described. Like, it's really important to figure out what you're missing. I know what it was, Corey. You were talking about the Ann Seltzer poll.
right.
I see something like that and I get worried.
Oh,
It's really, really, you got to catch yourself. It's the thing you want to believe. And if it corresponded with a bunch of other things, then okay. But it was kind of out there on its own. And the magic that some people have, Ann Selzer is this legend. She's a
yeah.
legend of polling. And so she's an authority figure, and there's something about the authority that makes us cling to it. But I'm a big believer in connections. If something is true, it's going to connect with other bits of evidence, other observations, other patterns of history.
Right.
And if I don't see those, that gets me worried. But I instinctively react in a negative way when I feel my own bias is coming in, when I
Hmm.
feel myself beginning to believe what I want to believe, and there isn't enough evidence to support it.
So I didn't mean to get too far ahead of myself here, but the Ann Seltzer poll, Des Moines Register, is central to what concerns me the most about the actions of the Trump 2.0 administration, and that is the very material, direct attack on our constitutional rights. You don't even have to leave the First Amendment, and you're already hitting at least 4 out of 5 of them that are listed there. Freedom of press, in relation to Des Moines Register and Ann Seltzer, but certainly freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of redress of grievances, with the attack on law firms that dared
Yep.
to have lawyers that represented cases against the Trump campaign. Or due process, in the 5th. It's just that is what concerns me the most. Perhaps the only thing that might concern me more is as I sit down with friends of mine who either voted for Trump this last time or Trump adjacent. They don't care. They don't care. And I can't. I don't understand or maybe I'm not reckoning fully with how that has come to be. That a violent attack on the Capitol to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, that these very direct and material threats to our democracy and our constitutional freedoms, our constitutional rights, are not acknowledged. That I was sitting down with a pastor yesterday who spent a lot more time worried about transgender athletes and was just very dismissive of a case against Des Moines Register. Let him, like it was just very dismissive. I don't understand. Will, help me understand.
So let's bracket the trans thing for a minute. But I want to ask you about your friends. I want to ask you about these people you're talking to.
Yeah.
Are they telling you that they don't really care about these freedoms that you're saying are in jeopardy? Or are they telling you they don't really believe they are in jeopardy?
There's a broad for every person I'm friendly with and have ongoing relationships and conversations with. There's a different. Everybody's different. That's the real answer. So sometimes I'll get someone who is frankly a conspiracy theorist. There's no simpler, kinder, gentler way to put it. So the talking points that Sean Hannity was already starting to congeal on January 6th itself. Well, they had it coming was one of the talking points. What did you think would happen was one, or many people are saying it's Antifa, it's a false flag operation. What were some of the other ones? Just there were three or four talking points that guys like Will Cow and Sean Hannity that morning were already starting to kind of workshop, and I'm still
Right.
hearing those today, despite the fact that there were the 60 plus cases, despite the fact that there was what was it called, Phantom Ninja something, no. It was like a game guy that was doing the Arizona Cyber Ninja. Is that right?
Yeah, cybernet.
Despite all of that, but there's still this belief that Trump is true. Trump is honest, and what he's saying is true, and that anybody who doesn't believe him are the bad guys. But then there's other folks who just don't have the time for it. Like I got to go pick up my kids from soccer practice. I don't have
Right.
time for this. I just see the gas prices. One of my kids, he just sees that it costs more for a Big Mac now than it did 4 years ago, or his Big Mac Happy. Not you know what I mean? Like the $5, the $4 meal is now $5. So to him, that's all Biden's fault.
Right.
And January 6th didn't matter. Is just not on his radar. So there's everywhere in between.
Yeah. So some people we're not going to be able to retrieve from. They've fallen into a cult, and if you can save their soul, good for you. I've given up on fighting for those folks. But there are other people who are in that category that you're describing. They're living their lives, and they just don't care that much. We have a Bill of Rights, but notoriously, there's a lot of people who would sell their Bill of Rights. They don't like it's if you're not really feeling it, if there isn't oppression going on in your life where your rights are being taken away, you're not really, it's all kind of an abstraction to you.
Hmm.
So I can sort of understand that. And, people have their lives to live. This is, by the way, how authoritarianism often works, that people are okay, Vladimir Putin doesn't allow any real political opposition, but like, how's the price of eggs in Moscow?
Yeah.
That's how people live. That can happen in this country. I mean, we'd like to believe that there's something special about America, that we wouldn't let that happen. But I think it's pretty clear that there's nothing in our DNA that prevents that. These are all this is, I mean, conservatives have always talked about culture. You got to preserve institutions and culture, or you'll lose what you have. And we're kind of there. Like we there's been enough erosion in American culture that it's just not clear to me that enough people are going to fight for our rights. But I will say the hopeful version of this is January 6th just wasn't that bad. I mean, I'm giving you the most generous
Okay.
version of
It
the indifference that you're describing.
wasn't that bad because it didn't work
Yeah, it
at the end of
wasn't
the
it,
day.
it didn't it wasn't. I mean, and there are plenty of people out there who feel this way. They wouldn't articulate it this way because it just like it's a negative for them. It just didn't okay, that was really weird, right? And we shouldn't do that. but like a bunch of crazy people went to the Capitol and they attacked it, and that was kind of scary, but we got it under control. The cops came in, the National Guard came in, Congress was able to continue. The new president was properly validated and took office, and we went on. And some police officers got sick, but and then a couple people died, but like it wasn't. It was violence. It was political violence, but it wasn't on the scale that we've seen in some other countries. So that's the most generous version I can give you.
Are you worried about the next January 6th? Whether it's 2026 or 20 after the 2026 election or after the 2028 election?
I am less worried about January 6th than I am about other ways of authoritarianism accelerating in this country. I'll give you an example. I once went to research. I was going to try to write a piece comparing Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election to what authoritarians had done in other countries. And I couldn't write the piece. And the reason I couldn't write it was everywhere I looked, the authoritarians didn't try to overturn election results. They never let it get to that point.
Mm.
They made sure to rig the election beforehand, what Trump falsely accuses the Democrats of doing. So that's the real. If you're looking for America to follow in the path of other authoritarian countries, that's what would happen, is they would make sure to cripple the opposition. So let's take something you've discussed. You just mentioned intimidating the law firms, right? Intimidating media organizations, filing lawsuits, threatening them with government sanctions, making them do settlements, making them back off from representing your opponents. That's a much more likely path to authoritarianism. So that's the stuff that I'm watching. The use of the government now that Trump is in power to intimidate political opposition, to weaken political opposition, and to make it so that Republicans simply, or so that the Trump party, which happens to be called Republican right now, can't lose elections.
Yeah. It makes me wonder how many organizations and individuals simply won't bother to pursue a certain case. If in the case the example of a law firm, write a particular story, pursue an investigative piece on the part of a journalistic outlet, or even individuals going to a peaceful assembly, peaceful protest. How many folks are just gonna, it's not worth it. It's not, even doing something like this, like, look, this is a humble little thing that we've been doing for a few years, but I wonder how many folks would consider doing a pro-democracy themed program and are just saying, I got a job, with whatever, and it's not worth me risking my job with this law firm or my job with this studio or whatever for me to have a conversation, on a podcast. So I wonder to the degree to which it stifles speech and assembly and all of the other freedoms before they even exercising our free redress of grievances, even before it gets started.
Absolutely. I mean, that is happening. That is happening right now. We all know people who have, I mean, I have friends who they're scrubbing their website, or they're changing their language. They are not engaging in some activity. They're not doing something that would put them on the record and get them in trouble. Anybody who has a government contract, anybody who's part of an organization that could be hurt by the government cutting off funding, if not to them, then to somebody who directs money to them. Trump can hurt a private company like the law firm. Trump can hurt your business. Trump directly threatens your business. Even if Trump hasn't directly threatened my business, he's just attacked my neighbor company over there, my neighbor law firm. So let's lie low.
Yeah.
Lots of people lying low. And this doesn't count officially as government encroachment on liberties, but it has the same effect. People are afraid of the consequences, so they censor themselves.
Yeah. I'm curious of your thoughts because you've always been candid about your own reflections and what you think you've gotten wrong. I'm grappling with something right now, and I'm hoping maybe you can help me think it through. Um, so I'm not on Twitter anymore. I wonder, you used to be primarily a Twitter guy. Are you?
I moved over to Blue Sky. I went once at some point somebody finally showed me I was very unhappy with the Blue Sky app. There wasn't an app. There was this it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
I went away from Blue Sky. I wasn't happy with what Threads was becoming. At some point somebody showed me that Blue Sky actually had an app that could do what Twitter did. They could basically mimic
yeah.
almost all of, and that point I just moved over. Yeah.
I hope they simplify the tags or the how we identify, because it's such a long thing. It takes up so
It
many
is.
words.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so on Twitter in mid 2022, I was starting to curate threads, like little digital conversations, and sometimes they were in person, informal gatherings, sometimes somewhat formal in person gatherings. But I had to develop a loose set of rules in order to curate healthier conversations. That's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, is get folks to better understand each other across our partisan divides, right? So I just pulled up my old Twitter account. I haven't fully erased it yet. It says,
Don't erase it, Corey.
oh,
I'm pleading with everyone. Don't delete your Twitter account because
okay.
it's history.
Oh,
There is the Twitter. I know Elon Musk is bad in many ways, but current Twitter is a repository of a lot of conversations, really interesting conversations that happened for many years. And I would implore people, particularly if you have engaged in a conversation with others,
yeah.
if you delete all of your material, the context is all gone for them. It's history being lost, and it's really important. So that's
Okay.
my plea.
All right. Yeah, I haven't been active on there, but there are some of my friends, especially some of my some people that I follow, like my sports guys that I follow. They're still primarily Twitter guys. But this is what I wanted to ask you about, and it's more like, I don't know, professional advice, personal advice. The loose rules that I developed were restating some of the rules of these threads. Nonsense will be muted, incivility will be blocked, proven falsehoods and threats will be reported. Now, what I'm questioning is, so how I managed that was I would erase nonsense. When somebody's just like, "Oh, you're stupid. You're just a stupid libtard, whatever." That's I would delete those comments. But I would also, what I found is what persists now on all of our different platforms are proven falsehoods. So there was one where I was talking about, I think it might have been after January 6th, and then all of the conspiracy theories came back out, and I just wasn't having it. I'm not going to have a good conversation diverted by someone saying it was Jewish space lasers or something stupid like that. So I would delete. But now I'm wondering, should I leave those comments up there? Should I not delete those conversations and rely on the truth that I grew up thinking is that the way to combat bad speech is with better speech.
Mhm.
That's what I'm wondering now.
So when you say delete, you mean how you're deleting stuff on Twitter or blocking it?
Well, some I would block if it came to a threat, an actual,
Right.
I'm going to find you. Next time I see you, I'm going to beat your face. Which
Right,
happened.
right.
You know,
What do you mean by delete? Because there's muting, blocking. What's the?
yeah. So they're all a little bit different. Facebook just allows you to delete a comment.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. I
so
don't do Facebook, so that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're all a little bit different. And Twitter has reporting. That's these rules are particular to Twitter, but I have to adapt them for each platform. But it's basically the same thing. Where if I
Right.
can delete a comment, I will. I'll try to be discerning and err on the side of leaving it up there. But I think a couple of times I've had an itchy trigger finger when it came to, especially the ones that sound about January 6th. Well, what did you think would happen? Which to me just sound like talk. You've compared Trump's proclivities to abuse women to the same proclivities that he has to taking over Greenland. Well, in Canada. Well, I can do it. They'll let me do it. And that language, that excuse. Well, what did you think would happen? Sounds
Right.
to me like an abusive husband, an abusive spouse.
Right.
So I would take those comments down. And that one is a little bit more black and white to me. But the ones about well, it was only a few people, and at the end of the day, it was really a bunch of leftists and Antifa, and it was a peaceful, and the police let them in, and I don't know, stuff like that. Maybe I should leave that up there and allow that part of the conversation to be diverted. I'm
Right.
thinking out loud now. I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
So my first thought, well, the one that I'm thinking at the moment in response to your question is, we can't really keep up with it. There's
Yeah,
just you can't keep up with just the amount of lies that's out there, and particularly people who are just deliberately lying. They can just manufacture this stuff at a rate that you can't stop. The more efficient way to deal with it is to undercut the speaker. And I know you're not supposed to do that. You're always supposed to argue with the point and not reject the speaker. But if we take the most obvious case, which is Donald Trump, he lies just all the time. And reporters have tried for years to keep up with him and do fact checks. Here, what's the count? It was like 30 or 35,000 in his first term, more since this guy, and he just goes out and says that the much more efficient thing is to drive home to people the message: this guy lies,
yeah,
right? He's lied so much that you should assume anything he says is not true. And I know how you're dealing with people who are absolutely committed to him. Those people are not going to change. But for people on the margins, I just don't think we can keep up with enough of his lies too. And I did a couple of videos during the fall. We Bulwark, we were doing videos, and every week I would do a video. And part of what I was trying to do was, I can't possibly correct. Here's what Trump said. Here's 100 lies he told this week. I can't keep up with that. I just want to pick one lie, and I would do this story by video of, here's the one lie, and I would take people through it. And my goal in this was to show how he does it. And there were a couple of cases. There was one, and I chose them because of, you could have video of him responding to being corrected.
yeah,
There was one about Van Jones, like that Trump claimed that Van Jones had never thanked him for the First Step Act. It was a criminal justice bill, and and there was and you could there was video of Trump being shown the video that debunked his falsehood. Like, here's the video shown to him by a friend. Like, Corey, this never happens in real life, right? We have video of your friend showing you the video that shows that your story is false. And Trump sees it and he just bats it away. And then he goes right on saying the same thing. And my goal with that is, like, to show you, I can't debunk everything Donald Trump is saying because there's just too much of it. But I just want to show you how pathological he is. Because when you see this, if you are susceptible at all to what I'm saying to you, this man cannot be trusted on anything, because you can just see how he refuses to accept information. Maybe that moved some people. I don't know. But let me come back to your question about how to deal with this stuff in your life. You can try to underscore that a person who is repeatedly lying in your feed or whatever is like, okay, this is a person you should not trust. You can try to block them. I never blocked people on Twitter. I mute them, because my attitude is, I don't want to spend my time talking to you, but I also don't want to, like, leave a track record of, oh, you blocked me.
yeah.
And I don't think I can stop people from believing those lies. I can't stop them from getting it out. So yeah, it's a project of, but then you have the additional problem, Corey, of, do you really know who it is who's posting that stuff? Like,
So I try to curate. I try to not just curate the conversations, but who's in the conversation. Um, it's hard to do that on a platform like YouTube, but most of the platforms, Facebook, you can at least I'm connected with them. So to your point about blocking, I feel like when I get to the point of blocking someone, I almost consider it as a loss for me. Um, because part of it is I don't want to give up on people. I don't want to give up on a relationship. Now, I will say that there have been 3 times over the last, I don't know, 2 years or so, when I had to quote unquote unfriend someone, and there have been very specific times. One actually has, we circled back around, we renewed our friendship. We had this wonderful get together 6 or 9 months after, the unfriending, and we understood each other better. Our views largely haven't changed, but just understanding it was around October 7th. I have family in Israel, and I was going back and forth with this person, and I don't know about you, but it was traumatic. I mean, one of the um, my contemporaries, they all have kids, and it turned out that one of the kids did die on October
Mm,
7th. So
I'm so sorry.
we were, it was a tenuous time to say the least, right? And then this guy essentially called me an anti-Semite for not backing Trump. I'm like, okay, if there is a line somewhere, that's over the line. So that was one. But there have been a few times when I consider them all losses, when I get to that point. I'm wondering, if is there a line for you? Have you defined, if so, have you defined where that line is? If you would block someone or unfriend someone or even mute someone.
Well, I'm having trouble with this because I'm thinking of two different scenarios. One is somebody who I know closely. That sounds like what you're describing, somebody you have a relationship with in some way.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, most of the conversations are people that I have some familiarity with, and some of which I have a lot of familiarity or long-standing relationships with people I went to high school with back. So, but like I said, also there are certain platforms where I can't. YouTube, you just can't do that. Like there are people all around the country and all around the world who just drop in and say, "You don't know what you're talking about." You gave me a lot, whatever. So that's fine. It's all
Hmm.
well and good. These anonymous shit posters, you know.
Right,
Um, but yeah, the folks like guys I graduated, ladies I graduated high school with that I've known my whole life.
right.
No matter how, there's one I did have to because it was just getting too toxic. I forgot what there was a final straw. I forgot exactly what it was, but I just said, this is bad for me. It's bad for him, and it's not good for the conversation. They basically stifle all the rest of the conversations that might be happening here. So
Right. So it's my answer depends on all the different venues. So there are in social media, I'm like dealing with enough people that I'm just like, I'm cutting people off all the time. I'm not blocking them. I'm just like, I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
yeah,
I'm going to mute you because I can't reach you.
that's why you're not replying to my. Just
This is my standard, Corey, is will I or the other person be dead before either of us persuades the other of
right.
anything? Right.
Oh
And that's very frequent, right?
yeah.
So I mute those people. I'm just like, there's no point in us talking. You're not, I don't think you're beyond what I can reach.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong, but probably you're just wrong. And anyway, I do that all the time because there's lots of other people to talk to. But that's the social media context.
Yeah.
You're talking about people people you have an investment in, friends. I don't deal with a lot of Trumpers a lot. My family are not Trumpers, so that
Yeah.
hasn't been a problem for me. People I went to high school in Texas. There are plenty of people who I grew up with who are Trumpers. Some of them found me on social media, and I would be like, "Hey, nice to see you," and then eventually I would realize that they were part of that thing, and I would just sort of like mute them, or
Right.
not respond. Um, I have had a couple of friends, people who I was close to. I got a guy who still, corresponds with me on social media who he's clearly a Trumper. And today he's like all in on the tariffs. A guy who literally worked in international shipping.
Mm.
So I'm like, I don't know, pal. Like I'm not going to argue with that person. But the context that I really wanted to talk about when you
Okay.
when you brought this up is my favorite sports website. So you were talking earlier about sports. Like sports has been this sacred space for me. Like we're going to keep that. You talk about talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm trying to talk sports. I want to
Okay.
keep sports safe from politics, right?
Right.
I don't want to know what my professional football idols believe. Every time I find out, it's something I don't like.
Right.
In basketball, I'm generally okay since I'm more on the left.
Yeah.
Um, but so I go, this is going to be funny. I don't really talk about this, but I go to a website called Clutch Fans, which is for
Clutch fans.
fans of the Houston Rockets, because the Rockets were Houston, Clutch City. I'm from Houston. I'm around Houston.
Okay.
And I love this place, and I've been there for 30 years or whatever it is, back from the days when the Rockets had a couple of NBA championships in like the 1990s. And so I just have a lot of friends there. And honestly, Corey, on election night, this election night, very early in the evening, I'm looking at the results coming in, and I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I
Mm.
turn off CNN
Yeah.
and I went and I watched a Rockets game. That's what I did on election night. I'm like, I can't deal with this reality. I want to go to my happy place. And my happy place was watching the Rockets, who are a fun team now, young,
Yeah.
strong, very talented. They got a future. Uh, so we have had the problem that everybody's had. You have a space in your life. It's your church, it's your sports website, it's your favorite bar, it's something, some club you belong to or whatever. And politics has intruded. And now everything is coded. Are you red or blue? Are you Trump or anti-Trump?
Yeah.
And this is just a tyranny of politics. And notwithstanding everything that we've just discussed about authoritarianism and how people in authoritarian countries, they tune out politics and they go live their lives, and that's bad. Okay, it's bad, but on a human level, just to have relationships with people, and in the long term, to have the kind of relationship where you can still talk to each other
Yeah.
and bring people along if you believe that they've fallen into a political cult that's
Yeah.
harmful, you got to maintain relationships somehow. And so this this Trump stuff has infiltrated the Houston Rockets website. Why? Because the owner of the Houston Rockets, Tillman Fertitta, is a Trumper, and he has been sucking up to Trump for years. And now Trump made him the ambassador to Italy, and so people are like, they started a thread about it. And so I went in there and said, please, can we not talk about Trump? Can we not debate Trump here in the sport? This website, by the way, Corey, like other sports websites, has a place where you can go within the website to talk politics. That's not the sports section, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like we want to get that, but people keep doing it, and I'm having trouble getting them to leave the Trump stuff aside. But even I, who absolutely despise Donald Trump, I believe that Donald Trump is one of the worst human beings who has ever been elected to any office in this country, ever.
Ever.
But having said that, I want to be able to go and talk sports.
Yeah.
You may want to like go be able to talk. You have a church group, you have a book club, you have some other civic organization. There need to be spaces where we don't get obsessed with that stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. I do go to business networking meetings and all kinds of other functions where it's not political. And some of these groups particularly guard, the gatherings so that it's apolitical. So I have a lot of opportunities to get to know folks really well before we ever get to the politics thing. But listen, I am who I am. It's kind of like, eventually you're going to find out I'm a New York Mets fan. Like it's just, it is what it is. Um, but a lot of times I'll get to a point where I feel like I know somebody, and then I'll see something. Like the other day, I was sitting next to somebody at one of these business meetings, business get-togethers, and an alert popped up on her phone. I was like, "Oh, wait, my buddy is a Trump fan." Oh, I wouldn't have put that together. In a way, in a way, there's a little bit of disappointment, because I prefer constitutional democracy, or our constitutional republic. Um, but in a way, it's encouraging because I know this person to be a good person. You
Right,
know,
right.
I know them in so many other ways other than this, red hat that they might wear. you know, so I don't know. It takes me off guard. But you brought up something. The owner of the Houston Rockets. I was curious why you think so many. It's one thing if it's a single owner who has a particular affinity for Donald Trump, and especially if he believes that the result can be, becoming a diplomat somewhere in a, Italian diplomat. Um, but I'm wondering what you make of Facebook and Amazon and all of these companies basically capitulating to what they're smart people. They have to see the direction that the country is going. Um, do you think it's just a P&L, a profit and loss based calculation? Is that purely what it is? Or is there something else at play why is that? Even Apple, I mean, Tim Cook, like, What do we see happening?
Wait, Corey, what do you think is at play? What else would it be?
Okay, here's what I think. I think that Meta, Apple, the biggest companies in the world know how to do business in Hungary, know how to do business in Turkey, in some cases, even China and Russia, right? They know this. They also have enough smart people around them to make an assessment of the character Donald Trump and say, well, this is what we need to do. It's going to cost us $1 million for an inauguration committee. We have to put out some, press releases here and there that appeal to him. This is how we're going to do business. And it's going to cost it. And they do a cost benefit analysis. They say it's going to cost us X because some people are not going to like it, and they're going to stop going to our store for a day. I'm being simplistic in my analysis of it, but the bottom line is Meta knows how to do business in Turkey. So this is how they now see the direction of things. They've calculated this is how we have to do business here.
Well, I think that's true, but I think that's kind of overlaps with the profit and loss argument, right?
So
I
you
mean,
think at the end of the day, it's just a bottom line issue.
it's absolutely a bottom line issue. I'll just express my prejudice up front. I much prefer. I like simple theories. I retreat from conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But I have a very broad. Conspiracy theories are at one end of a spectrum of very complicated, ornate. Something is going on behind the scenes. It's always involving money. When I was writing about Lindsey Graham, it's that he's gay and they have blackmail on him and all this stuff. I mean, all kinds of kind of wild theories. I never found evidence for that, and it was easy to explain Lindsey Graham in much simpler ways. And I think that's true of Trump, and I think that's true of Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. These guys are so. My short version of this is whose rule is it? Never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. In this case, it's cowardice. Cowardice is driving everything. What we have is one bully, Donald Trump,
Yeah.
and legions and legions of cowards. Cowardice is ubiquitous, right? It's the human condition. And so everybody's just going along. These guys are, and so once he got elected, I mean, remember, Kamala Harris outraised Trump by 3 to 1, I think it was, like a lot.
It was significant.
A
Yeah.
lot. Business was they did not want they knew Trump was dangerous in some ways.
Well, it works on both sides. We just saw in Wisconsin that, Elon by himself outraised, for the judges election.
Right. So, but the point is, it was after Trump got elected
Yeah.
that there's this incredible suck up, right? Like there was a giant, as Ross Perot said, a giant sucking sound. The giant sucking sound was all of these business moguls coming to Donald Trump. How much money can we throw at your inaugural committee?
Right.
How much? We're going to have dinner. We're going to tell you how much we love you, because everybody knows that Donald Trump is susceptible to flattery.
Sure.
He will turn on a dime if you flatter him. So all these guys they're capitulating is all they're doing. They're entirely focused on profit and loss. Those law firms you mentioned.
Yeah.
All those law firms are just like, hey, we got to do business. We can't be cut off from access to government business. We can't be cut off from our security clearances. So we're gonna do whatever we can to appease them. Even what was it? The deal these law firms are cutting is pro bono work, right? Some of them
Yeah.
here. That's a donation. That's like, here, we'll put some of our attorneys for a certain amount of time on work that you want us to do. Well, okay. And that's going back to what you said about Erdogan or Orban,
Yeah.
you got this guy at the top who has his feelings and wants are you with me or against me? And they're going to do things to appease this autocrat, whether it's Orban or Erdogan or Trump. And that's all that's going on.
So this is in regard to the companies capitulating, large public companies. But you said something in a recent piece. No, actually, it was on your talk with JVL. You said eventually you hear a general idea into which everything clicks.
Yeah.
So on a larger scale of what we've seen, I guess it's been close to 100 days now, or at least I forget how many days it's been. What is the general idea that's emerging for you?
Oh,
of what's happening?
Very simple. They're idiots. These guys are idiots. They said, sorry, I mean, they don't know what's going on.
No, I'm not
They,
talking about the companies. I'm talking about in our country as a whole.
oh yeah, sorry. No, I'm talking about our government. I'm
Right.
talking about the simple, and I really do want people to understand this because there's like, oh, Trump is the Republican, they're authoritarian, they're corrupt. Well, that's all true. But
Yeah.
number one, they're stupid. They're really stupid.
You're talking about elected Republican elected officials?
Yes, the government of the United States, Donald Trump, the House and Senate Republicans aren't stupid. They're following the stupid. They're
Yeah.
just but what this government is about, because I think it's really important for Americans to understand this. What's going on with this president, with this administration, and what's going on for these 2 years and the next 4 years, you're going to see just an amazing quantity of stupid. And you really need to look at it and recognize it for what it is. Like that, but because you asked about how it all clicks together. The tariffs, incredibly stupid. Like the president of the United States literally does not understand economics. He doesn't
Right.
understand what a trade deficit is. He doesn't understand the history
Right.
of what tariffs have done, right? So he's wrecking the economy. He's wrecking the United States economy and the world economy. The government, Elon Musk with the chainsaw, and Donald Trump having this guy stand there and talk like he's got all Elon and his geniuses. These guys are morons. Remember, Elon destroyed Twitter. He
Yeah.
took a company, he paid what, $44 billion for a company. I don't know what it's worth today, but he wrecked it.
Yeah.
And he cut it off from the outside world, just like Trump is now trying to cut off the United States from the outside world and thinks everybody's going to come in. No, no, they're going to go everywhere else, and you're just going to shrink the value of your company or your government. They're tearing people, they're like mass firing people from the CDC, from the nuclear weapon security people, from social, they're just gutting the government, and the damage is everywhere, and there's going to be so much more damage, and people are going to start to feel it. They don't get their social security checks. So these guys are just very stupid. The Signal chat, they literally put the editor of an anti-Trump publication, The Atlantic, on like, we're about to bomb the Houthis. We're about to bomb Yemen. Here's where we're going. Here's when we're going, right? And it's only because that guy, Jeff Goldberg, is actually way more patriotic than any of them ever were, that
Right.
he didn't like publish that. He's the editor of a magazine. He's got the greatest scoop in the world. He
Yeah.
sits on it. Because he's protecting the country. And those scumbags have the gall to claim, hey, that the raid went off fine. It went off fine because he kept his mouth shut.
Right.
Not because, but these guys are idiots and they won't admit it. They won't even face up to the most basic thing, Corey. Any administration, Republican or Democrat, of the last 50 years, if that happened, the president would be out, people would be out saying, hey, you know what? We really screwed this up. I'm sorry, we're going to fix this. We're going to investigate this and see how this happened. No, no, no. The Trumpers will never admit it. So these guys are morons. They're wrecking the economy. They're wrecking national security. They're wrecking the government. They're wrecking the health agencies. They're wrecking vaccines. They're wrecking everything. That's what all clicks together.
So the what is it called? The Dunning-Kruger
I
effect?
think it is Dunning-Kruger. Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger, where what makes things worse is when somebody who doesn't have intellectual capacity thinks very highly of their own intelligence. But here's the other thing. I think they have to do a part two of that study 25 years after the first one came out. And that is, my brother and I have this funny way of talking about it. Like, it's okay if you're not like intellectually gifted, that's cool. Like I wasn't, gifted with a lot of height. Like I'm 5'7" on a good days when the wind's blowing right. So some people just have different capacities than others. But just know that that's your short. Like you have to make up for it and working extra hard. You can still make. But if you're dumb, but you're also an asshole, that's like a toxic combination. You can't afford to be an asshole if you're kind of dumb. So, but
Right.
yeah, go ahead. So,
No, but that the Dunning-Kruger really does capture Trump and his people. Like, remember, there's Trump sitting at the Oval Office, sitting at his desk and talking about what a genius Elon Musk is. And Elon and his genius, he keeps talking about their high IQs. These 20-year-olds who are going in and without any information, without study, they're like mass firing people, like cutting off grants for like health, like never mind around the world, in the United States.
Yeah.
Like the damage these guys are doing, and at the same time, Trump believes that he is genetically superior. He's got his uncle who went to MIT, who was a genius. Trump himself was a genius. Biden was stupid. Everyone else is stupid. They're all the stupid people.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he is what the as we sit here, the stock market is down like 4% or 5% in a day.
Mm.
It's down, I forget, it's in correction territory since Donald Trump came in. And and he's not getting the feedback, right? He just rejects it. So
Right.
yeah, it's he's an idiot and he thinks he's smart. And at some point, Corey, I pray that all of our friends, people we know who are still in the cult, will eventually register that this isn't working
Mm.
and that maybe he isn't what the genius that they thought he was.
Well, there's good news and bad news when it comes to that because you printed a story in November. Yeah, here it is. Um, just after the election. And one of the stats, it was the one called Just How Authoritarian Are Americans. One of the stats that just my jaw dropped. 44% of Republican voters said they trusted Trump completely to tell the truth about election results and the legitimacy of elections. So the bad news is 44%. Like Trump is magic. Like whatever Trump does, he's honest. I like him because he's on. Like what are we talking about here? But there's still 56%. There's still, that means there's 56% that are still willing to say no, he's not going to tell the truth about election results. So there's good news here. Okay, so we're already going over time. There's so much to talk about. But I want to float a couple of um, possibilities as we look into the near future here. Um, and maybe I'm grasping for those ponies and rainbows. One is what we're already starting to see is other major countries, first, what do you call them? First world countries around the world are reckoning with the reality that America cannot be counted on so many levels, economically, diplomatically, militarily, on so many levels. So what it's doing is, in the case of Europe, saying, well, okay, we have to build up our own military forces and resources because there are still countries who believe in the sovereignty of other democratic nations, in the virtuosity of in the ethical imperative of coming to the aid of allies,
Mhm.
things like that. So as I look at foreign policy, that's one. I'm wondering if other real leaders, whether they be countries or individuals, will emerge because of the ethical and economic and every other kind of failure that we're seeing on the part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think it's happening. I mean, it's certainly happening with respect to Ukraine. The bad news is the most important country in the world and the hub economy of the world and the
Hmm.
superpower has elected this venal moron. I'm sorry, and like not just elected him once, elected him twice, which suggests that we're a seriously defective country. Okay, we're seriously defective, and the world's now, our allies, like in Western Europe, look at us and hope, and Canada, and they look at, okay, we overestimated the Americans, we can't count on them. But fortunately, even though we are the most important country in which this disaster could have happened, we're only one country.
Hmm.
And so there are other countries that have sane governments. And I'm thinking of, Western Europe, and they're stepping up. It's going to take them quite a while to like build up enough defense capacity to resist Russia's incursions into Eastern Europe. I say Eastern Europe because for now it's Ukraine,
Right.
and it's going to take some time but somebody's got to protect the Baltics. And do you think the United States can be counted on to protect the Baltics?
No.
If I'm the Baltics, I'm not counting on it, right?
Right.
So, but there is already activity to protect Ukraine. And this is the nature of life in a lot of ways. It's a dependency force. The Europeans depended on us. They depended on our nuclear umbrella. Well, they're not going to do that anymore. They're going to have their own nukes. That's not great. But they depended on us to, marshal the free world against Russia and Ukraine. And clearly, they're figuring out, okay, we got to lead now. That they're stepping forward, and that's good. You mentioned I just wrote about Greenland. My buddy JVL wrote a terrific column this week about when J.D. Vance went to Greenland
Ugh.
and said, you leave Denmark and come to us. And this just ongoing bizarre 3-month campaign to like take Greenland from the Greenlanders and also from the Danes. It's all nuts. And JVL said NATO is dead. NATO is dead. You can't go and attack an ally like Denmark, which literally sent troops to help us in Iraq and Afghanistan, if I recall correctly. And he says NATO is dead. And my argument to JVL is and was NATO's not dead. NATO is still protecting Europe. It's still protecting Western Europe, but it's now protecting Western Europe from us.
Right.
They have stepped up and said to Trump, you can't do this. You can't come in and take Greenland. And I don't know what Donald Trump's plans are for how he's going to do that. He's threatened to tariff Denmark
Yeah.
unless they hand over Greenland. But the Europeans are stepping up and they are holding to those values that you just articulated. They're defending them against the aggressor, even when the aggressor is us. And that's a terrible story from the standpoint of the United States. It's terrible that we've become evil in that respect.
Yeah.
But that our government has. But it is somewhat consoling to see that there is still goodness in the world.
Yeah.
Hogwarts may fall, but that doesn't mean the war is over. That's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other part of my working theory, I guess you could call it, about how we go forward, I've heard a lot of conversation, and I am personally very concerned about three equal branches of government, the balance of powers horizontally, right? In the case of the legislative, because it's a Republican majority House and Senate, they basically said, "Okay, here you go. You want my kids too?" But the judicial is proving to be, well, for lack of a better word, quite a bulwark, pretty consistently, with few exceptions. What I am curious about is the vertical balance of powers. So, meaning the horizontal balance of powers is legislative, executive, judicial. Vertical is federal, state, local. And I'm wondering if there are actions on the part of certain governors. Newsom obviously comes to mind because I'm in California, but there are other, democratically held states that have legal ways of pushing back against anti-constitutional or detrimental actions on the part of this administration.
So, I mean, a delightful question, Corey, because every once in a while somebody reminds me that there were pre-Trump versions of conservatism, like the one that says the government closest to the people is the one that governs best. These are insights lost as Republicans became MAGA. So we have this nationalist version of the Republican Party that just imposes the will of the federal government under one man on everybody else. I think it's very difficult for the locals to resist for the reason that there's so much money that the federal government can control. And Trump is well aware of every lever he has threatening. I mean, the part where I don't know where things stand in California, but the idea that the president of the United States would threaten to cut off money to protect you from fires, like
Right.
that was insane. There was a point where he threatened to cut off the water supply. Wasn't that it?
He went and did the symbolic act that ended up costing us billions of gallons of water. But in California, so this isn't. This is a very, very far-fetched idea, but one thought came to mind. I'd have to ask an economist. I'd have to ask a constitutional attorney about this. But can Gavin Newsom go to Canada and say, okay, so Donald Trump is acting in bad faith with you, deal directly with us, because after all, we are the fifth largest economy in the world, as a separate entity, California, that is.
Right.
So can someone like Newsom pull a stunt like that, circumvent the tariffs that Trump is imposing, and deal directly with? I haven't said that out loud, especially not on a recording like this. But I'm wondering.
Yeah, I had never thought of it. Interstate commerce is covered, so.
But so is due process. So is the freedom of speech and assembly. Like are all these other things. So what's stopping a rogue Democratic governor saying, okay,
right.
we'll deal with you,
What,
you know.
Corey? Wait, you're making me wonder. What are the models for this? I have a vague recollection that when the previous Republicans, the Bush Republicans, were messing with, was it Plan B? Was it some sort of
Oh yeah,
drug device or medical thing where they would the states then arrange their own. Well, let's go back to masks and
right,
protective equipment during COVID, right?
right.
There certainly were states, Maryland was one. Lots of states were trying to cut deals with foreign countries to like send us your, oh, it was tests.
Right,
I
right.
think it was
Yeah, the
tests.
tests
Get
that
it?
came out. Yeah.
Like, I mean, Larry Hogan was the governor of Maryland, and he got some from South Korea, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can do commerce, but does it circumvent the tariffs? I mean, literally last night, Corey, I was watching a bunch of like 25, 30-year-old Trumpers doing their video, like people who are in the government, like
Yeah.
high senior officials in the White House, because they're all young and stupid now. And they were talking about how we're going to make sure that that we really crack down on these tariffs. We're going to make sure everybody has to pay them. We're not going to let, China send something to Vietnam and they sit on it for 2 months, then they call it Vietnamese and send it to us. We're going to stick it to those Vietnamese, right? So I bet they're looking how they can cut off every one of these routes to get
Yeah.
products into the United States without the tariffs. Because remember, they think, these idiots, that the tariffs are good and that like that's money going into the treasury and that the money is somehow coming from China and Vietnam and not being paid by American consumers.
um, yeah. Well, my thinking is that Stephen Miller was in particular was saying it pre-election, and now they're actually imposing it. Like he basic his thought is, well, we're going to round up millions of people, and we're going to do it our way on our timing. Let lawfare catch up with us. By the time they catch up with
Yeah,
us 2, 3, 4 years down the road, it'll already be done. And it doesn't take 2 or 3 years. It's 2 months, and there are people who are lost in Venezuelan prisons. They're gone.
right,
Some of whom, I mean, in a way, good. We want murderers and rapists and actual criminals, and that pose a threat but in America, even those people are given due process. Why? Specifically so that, you know, somebody who is not a lawbreaker, somebody who's here legally, somebody has legal permanent residence, who's a father, an expecting father. Like, yes, he engaged in speech that I personally very strongly disagree with, but
hmm,
that's not a crime. My people, our people. It was Jewish lawyers of the Anti-Defamation League who defended the neo-Nazi party
right,
in Skokie, Illinois in the 70s. Like, this is all part of it. So if Stephen Miller can round up millions of people or whoever, this
hmm,
administration, I say Gavin Newsom, it's his state, or other Democratic governors. So, they're his ports. Just as certain states had, they call them sanctuary cities, right? I wonder if you can expand that legal theory, that governing theory, that theory of sovereignty, to other things that are detrimental, not just to the economy, but to specific states and localities. And
right.
and Newsom saying, "Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway, and let your feds catch up with us."
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Well, because I was going to say that what happens then is your vertical scale goes back to the horizontal one in the sense that this goes to the courts.
Right.
And the question is, what do the courts do and how fast do the courts move? So I mean, JVL asked me, what's my nightmare scenario for what's the point where I would say America's gone, like we can't and like a particular red line. And my answer was, we're already on the verge of it, where judges rule against the Trump administration and say what you've said, like you've violated some provision of the Constitution, right? You can't send these people out under you can't deport these people the way you've done it, the process you've done. You have not given the process that you're supposed to. The judge issues a ruling, and Trump says, you know what? Um, this judge does not cannot I was elected to control national security and that's what I'm doing, and so we're just gonna like not pay attention to this court ruling. And if the president does that and all of these gutless Republicans in the House and Senate stand with him or just look the other way, that Judge Boasberg doesn't have an army.
Right.
That's he doesn't. They don't have the military to enforce it. They just neuter the judiciary by ignoring them. So that's the explicit version. The subtler version, where I could actually see this happening, is the Judge Cannon path, which is
Yeah.
Donald Trump was being prosecuted
Right.
for multiple, I think he was dead to rights in the classified documents case. But
Absolutely.
it so happened that he had a judge there who was friendly to him, and she issues a ruling that it just, it's a kind of a crazy ruling saying that the special counsels can't be appointed. They have to go through some, Senate confirmation. I don't know. Anyway, the point is she stalls the
She was
case.
picking up on Justice Thomas's opinion that he wrote, where
Right,
one clause in it made that suggestion, and
right.
she ran with it.
So you have a friendly judge somewhere in the pipeline. You find a friendly judge. If it's not the trial judge, you get somebody on appeal. They issue a ruling that stalls the case. And now you're into what you described before. You're running ahead of it, right? And in your scenario, it's what you think of as the good guys. Gavin Newsom can run ahead of the feds. But in my scenario, it's the bad guys. It's the Trump administration and Stephen Miller. And they're just like, you know what? While this judge stalls this case, we're just going to keep pumping people out. And if every once in a while, Corey, we get some innocent father, who like we misjudged his tattoo or we got his name mixed up with somebody,
Yeah.
if he ends up in a Salvadoran prison forever, well, you got to break a few eggs.
Right. Yeah. So that's it's anti-Christian, actually, anti-Judeo-Christian. Jesus would talk about going to save the one, leaving the 99 to save the one. So it's the upside in so many other ways too. It's the
Wait,
upside.
you think Jesus is the Messiah? Corey, that is so last millennium. There's a new Messiah. Like he almost died in Butler for our sins.
Oh man, this was part of my conversation yesterday with the pastor. Is I was looking at Micah 4, the first part of that. This is a whole other conversation. I don't know if we have time to get into it, but it was basically, it's the plowshares beating our swords into plowshares section of Micah, and how there will be peace. Part of that, not to get too deep into it, but part of the interesting part of that passage, the first part of Micah 4, is that other nations they would defer to Torah, which, as I'm sure you know, is basically law or a moral law.
Mhm.
And yet they would still be able to worship their own gods, little g gods, right? So God, like it's Israel, so, God would still be God, but these other nations would still be able to follow their own ways. But it's because we're able to live peacefully among each other because we're all submitting to at least some basic tenets of a moral authority. So that's what I was taking from Micah 4. My pastor was more concerned about, transgender athletes. Anyway, I could do this all day, man. But David French's book from, what is it, 2020 or 2021? I have to go back and reread it. It's Divided We Fall, I think. Yeah, Divided We Fall. And he outlines scenarios of how one imaginary scenario of how Texas would secede, another one how California would secede. And the scenarios he outlined, I should drop him a line. And he would either tell me, Corey, that's crazy, or I don't know, maybe he would take it and run with it. But I'd be interested in his. He's certainly a constitutional law expert.
Corey Nathan, insurrectionist. This is wild.
Okay, a couple of last questions before we go. One is the old TP&R question. What do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other? Or is it even possible?
I don't have an original answer for you. I'm going to give you a kind of a cliche answer because I think it's very true. And I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, but you got to have relationships with people that aren't about the thing that's bothering you.
Yeah.
I mean, no one cares what you know until they know you care, right? And especially right now when I'll just speak for myself. Again, I think Donald Trump is just one of the worst human beings in the world. And it's astonishing to me that anybody I know would vote for him, would think he's a good guy or whatever. But when that happens, I've just got to take a deep breath. If I ever hope to persuade this person and like live life with this, go fishing, go, play chess,
Yeah.
go play basketball, go into church, go into temple, go in, whatever. Just do something with this person that's a relationship that's not about that. Because if you go right at it, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
And it allows that cancer to take over everything in life. And as you said, Corey, these are good people. We've known good people and it's a paradox how they could believe this, but don't lose the goodness and don't completely give up on them if it is at all possible to have a friendly, civil, or loving relationship in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, have other points of connection so that this is not a pillar upon which everything else will fall if you have a difference there. That's an interesting point. I did a lot more talking on this conversation than I normally do, but I will give you the last chance to ask me if do you have any questions?
I the number one question that I am trying to understand is we have fallen into this upside down world
Yeah.
where we assume that good will prevail in the end or that evil will be punished. And we certainly think that in this country. Even when we've had long periods of evil like slavery and segregation and internment and stuff like that, eventually we rectified it. So we've regressed into this state where a lot of people just feel disoriented. Do you feel disoriented, and how are you coping with disorientation, moral disorientation, to the extent that you feel it?
Yeah, I've been feeling disoriented. Well, one of the immediate ways, to your point, was I was watching a lot more sports. Don't tell Tim and Sarah and them at the Bulwark, but I was listening to a lot less Bulwark, a lot less Dispatch, reading a lot less, of the stuff that Atlantic and the stuff that I normally read. And I was watching, and fortunately the Rangers. I'm a New York Rangers fan. They went on a nice winning streak during that time period, so that was good. Um, so that's one of the ways. But the other way, to your point, is that I have dear friends who ended up either voting for Trump or just could not bring themselves to vote for Kamala. So staying in conversation with them, whether it's just going to a dive bar or a cup of coffee or a poker game or something that we enjoy, is Bill Maddox and Liz Joyner on their talk that just got released the other day with the Village Square. They were saying, go to a movie, talk about the movie, read a book together. These other points of connection. I run a business. They're like these other points. There's so much more to life, and my family's history will prove that. As they were living through this confluence of attacks from the Cossacks and the Bolshevik Revolution and World War, the Tsar's army, they were still. One of my great uncles was running a bar, and one of my uncles was a rabbi, and one of my a couple of them were very actively in the early Zionist movement, active politically. One was recruited, but they were still, one was running a farm. So there's still life to be led outside of these political upheavals and historically even greater upheavals as we're going through now, if you can imagine that. So
Mhm.
there's lots of life to live. There's lots of other points of connection. Anyway, that's a good question. I'll keep thinking about that. Before we go, how can folks follow you online these days? Keep up with all the great work and all the great work you're doing at the Bulwark.
Bulwark.com. There's the website where we write things. We have a YouTube channel. I encourage people to you can just type Bulwark YouTube channel. You'll find us that way. We're
Great.
doing a lot of videos now. We do audio. My social media stuff, I'm not really on Twitter, although I post stuff there just as a copy. But like, it's what you said, Corey. I'm on Blue Sky, and you just use my last name like other people do. Like it's just Saletan, Saletan, and then it's what's the suffix they stick on there?
I
B
have
Sky
no idea.
Social. It's B Sky Social or whatever. The point is, if you just start typing my name, you'll get it. Lots of people are doing this.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
Substack too. You guys are pretty prolific on
Yeah,
Substack.
we publish on Substack, and so both the text and the video and audio products can be found there too.
Well, it's so nice to see you again, man. Thanks for coming
You
in
too,
and
Corey. I didn't
spending the
realize
time.
it had been so long.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I'm going to be in DC in May, the Democracy Group is doing a actual person get together. So are you in the DC area?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
I
cool.
am. So keep me posted on it.
I will. I'd love to finally see you in person, buy a lunch or something like that. So thanks for doing this, Will.
Thank you, Corey. It's a lot of fun.
You bet. And as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review, and you can watch these conversations on YouTube. Support us on Patreon. It's youtube.com/@politicsandreligion. Patreon is sort of the same. It's patreon.com/politicsandreligion. Your support really does make a difference. So thank you so much for all of it. Now go talk some politics and religion with ponies and rainbows and gentleness and respect, and have a great week.